Okay, well, we're about to watch. Okay, what we're about to watch is President Putin giving his speech where he's officially annexing the four republics or the four oblasts of Ukraine, which he's bringing in as republics within Russia. Now, this is not for the faint of heart, but if you're all in about Ukraine, then you want to watch this. If you do watch this, please put in the comments, I watched this, because I want to know who's hardcore enough to watch this whole thing. I'm going to pause it periodically, and I will give certain commentary. Here we go.
President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin.
Okay, he's walking in, making a big show of things, and he's going to be telling us just how awesome this annexation is.
Dear citizens of Russian Federation, citizens of DPR and LPR, Kherson and Zaporozhye regions, members of the Duma and senators of the Russian Federation. As you know, in Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republic, in Kherson and Zaporozhye region, we had referendums. The results have come through, and the results are known. People have made their choice, and it's definitive choice.
Well, it's definitive if you're one of the ballot stuffers, but 99% of Donetsk, really, where you bombed Mariupol and people's lives were destroyed. Come on, let's be honest.
Today we are signing the decree on accepting LPR, DPR, Zaporozhye and Kherson region. I'm sure that the Federal Assembly will support the laws of creating four new regions of four new subjects of the Russian Federation.
Just as he was sure that those four were going to be voting at 98, 99% even before the vote happened, because they were doing it.
Because this is the will of the millions of people.
No, it's not. It's the will of Putin and those that were controlling the vote.
Honeybook completely changed.
Sorry about that.
The way I do business.
Stop. Let's start from the top.
Oh, we're doing this right now?
And of course, this is their right, their integral right, which is emphasized in the principles of United Nations.
Now, that is baffling to me that he would say this when the UN General Secretary just said this is an illegal vote. It's not their right to have armed gunmen come door to door and say, you want to join Russia?
It's the self-determination of people.
No, it's not. This is not. It's a sham. It's a fake. It's a fraud. It's not self-determination of people.
It's the right that is based on the historical unity, which was defended by generations of.
Now, that point, he might actually have somewhat of a point that there was some historical connection with Catherine the Great and Novorossiysk, but that is hundreds of years gone by, and that is not enough.
Our people who for generations protected Russia, Rumyantsov, Suvorov and Ushakov fought in Belarus, Yekaterina II and Potemkin fought, and also our grandfathers and great-grandfathers fought in the wars.
Okay, the connection to the Second World War, still, that's a legit connection, but not enough to cause this to actually be happening today.
And people who did not agree with the military coup in 2014, people who gave their life.
He's sticking to the line that it was a military coup in 2014 rather than a popular uprising of the citizens of Ukraine, which is what the Maidan, or what they actually call in Ukraine the Maidan revolution, is the revolution of dignity.
Lives for the right to keep their belief, their language. It's the
Oh, I don't like that guy.
people of Donbass. These are victims of inhumane terrorist attacks conducted by the Kiev regime. So these are peaceful citizens, children, grandmothers, Russians, Ukrainians, people of various ethnic origins. Zakharchenko and Izhoga and Olga Nichura and the other heroes of this, the Murgamedov, who was a military who died heroically. All the heroes of the special military operation. They are heroes.
They're heroes if they're involved in the special military
heroes of-
operation. Are you freaking kidding me? No, they're actually killing innocents. And I mean, when you're firing missiles into shopping malls, when you are firing at civilians at a train station just trying to get away, stop saying that when you're creating war crimes in Bucha and Irpin and wherever else, Izium, those are not heroes.
The great Russia. And we would like to observe a minute of silence.
No, there is no minute of
In the
silence
honor.
for these guys. These guys are war criminals. They deserve not to have a minute of silence, but they deserve to be strung up. They deserve to be in the Hague or in wherever the war crimes tribunal that's coming. That was a minute? Wow. They don't even give them a minute of silence.
The choice of millions of people of LPR and DPR, Zaporozhye and Kherson regions. What's behind that is our common history. Despite all the difficulties.
Now, there is common history, but there wasn't a choice of these people. That's precisely the point. It wasn't a free and fair choice.
They have carried through this love for Russia, and this feeling cannot be exterminated by anyone. And that's why
that is fascinating that he says that this feeling cannot be exterminated by anyone. This war, if you look at the polls, the statistics are that there's generational hatred now between Ukraine and Russia. The people that were pro-Russian before was something in 25-30%, and now it's down to the single digits.
the older generations and the younger people who were born after the tragedy of the destruction of the Soviet Union.
Wow, the tragedy of the destruction of the Soviet Union. Did you hear that?
They wanted the unity. In 1991, there was a decision by representatives of the party, of the leading party, to dissolve the USSR, and this has created destroyed the connections between different parts of our country, and the last heads of the Soviet Union went against the will of the people of the Soviet Union and broke that country into smaller countries.
Well, tell that to Poland and tell that to other formerly terrorized by the Soviet Union countries like Lithuania and the other Baltic states and the Ukraine who want to be on their own. That's whose will do you want? Just you want to subjugate these people? Is that what it is? And you want to have the will of Russians to subjugate? Is that what we're talking about?
They just informed the people about that without asking them. And we accept that they probably did not understand what they were doing. and they did not
Wow,
understand
this is revisionist history. They knew exactly what they were doing. They couldn't contain it because it was the system was broken. It was so broken that when Gorbachev was dealing with glasnost and perestroika, which was essentially openness and we're going to be allowing you to do what you're going to do because we can't actually maintain it anymore. It's because the Soviet Union was fundamentally broken.
consequences this would lead to, but this is not important anymore. Soviet Union is no longer there. We cannot return to the past. And for Russia, we don't need this anymore. We're not aiming for that. But there's nothing stronger than the decisive will of millions of people who, according to their culture, to their language, believed to be part of Russia.
Well, I think there is something stronger, and it's the decisive will of Ukrainians who will not stop fighting till the last Ukrainian. Just watch.
They, for generations, they lived in a single country, and there's nothing stronger than the will.
Yeah, but they were in a single country that was welded together against the will of the people that were there. That's precisely the problem.
People to come back to their historic roots. For many years, the people in Donbass were subjected to genocide and shelling. And in Kherson, they tried to cultivate hatred for Russia. And lately, Kiev regime threatened death and punishment to teachers. And they were threatening repressions to the millions of people who supported Russia.
Okay, so which is exactly what the Russians are doing. The Russian teachers coming in, teaching Russian curriculum are doing exactly the same thing that he's complaining about of Ukrainians not teaching or not allowing Russian curriculum or whatever else.
But people from LPR, DPR, and Kherson and Zaporozhye expressed their will.
No, they didn't. See, it would be one thing if they actually did express their will. If it was a free and fair election and they expressed their will and they decided, you know what, we actually do want to vote and we are going there. But that's not what happened. This is all a sham. It's all a fake. It's all for show. This nobody believes. Maybe in Russia they do. Nobody outside of Russia actually believes that this actually happened. 99% vote in Donetsk. Really?
And the real masters of Kiev regime in the West need to remember this. People from Kherson, DPR, LPR, and Zaporozhye become our citizens forever.
Yeah. Okay. So the masters of the Kiev regime, he's talking about the United States, the empire of lies. No, we're not. We're actually their support. We're not their masters. And there's a big difference. We're supporting them because they're the closest thing to a democratic republic in the region. And it's scaring the crap out of you to have a functioning democracy on your border. Apparently, this is looking like North Korea.
And we call upon Kiev regime to immediately cease all military actions.
Of course you do. They're not going to stop. Why would they stop? Because just because you say something is not true and then you're claiming that this is your territory, you've got to be crazy if you think that Kiev's going to stop.
And the war that they began back in 2014.
They didn't begin it. You sent troops over the border.
And come back to the negotiation table. We are open.
Now, I predicted this, that they would talk about, hey, we just want peace now. Now that they have annexed, they're going to say, we just want peace, and trying to make it look like it's a defensive war. It's not.
That many times. But people of Lugansk, Donetsk, and Kherson, and Zaporozhye, we will not discuss these areas because they made their choice.
Yeah, sure they did.
And today's Kiev authorities have to respect the expression of the will of this people.
No, they don't, because it's not the expression of the will of these people. It's the fake expression that you have ballot stuffed. That's all it is. So it's not to be respected at all.
Path to peace. We will protect our land using all our forces, and we will do everything to ensure people's security. And this is the great liberating mission.
Okay, so this is why he needed mobilization, so he can protect their land, which is now these four oblasts of Ukraine. It's now their land, and it's not really their land, but he's going to act like it is. And because of that, now he has a mandate to defend. So he's not the aggressor anymore. He's now the defender, or at least he thinks he is. That's the narrative. And the Russian trolls are going to be putting this out. That's why it's important that you're watching this now. If you're still watching this now, press like, tell me below, I'm watching this video, because this is important. There's an informational war that's going on, and it's just as important, and it's ramping up. It's more important right now at this moment than is the hot war in actually achieving these objectives.
For our people, we will of course rebuild all destroyed towns, and we will build hospitals and theaters and schools, and we will continue developing infrastructure and industry. We will ensure healthcare and pension support, and of course we will increase levels of security. We will do everything for people in these regions to feel the support of all republics and all parts of this large motherland.
Yeah, we're going to rebuild what we broke. Great. Keeping it classy, Putin.
Dear friends, colleagues, I'd like to address the soldiers and officers who are taking part in special military operations, to warriors of Donbass and Novorossiya, who also joining military after the partial mobilization, those who volunteered to come to the recruitment centers. I would like to address their wives and children.
For those who volunteer, partial mobilization. Now, partial mobilization is actually so that it doesn't freak out the whole country with full mobilization. That's part one. And then you have to add on to that more people have actually, of military age, have fled Russia in the last week and a half than actually invaded Ukraine. Get that in your head. That's what Russians actually think about this.
Like to say why they're fighting there. Who is the enemy that is against us? Who is creating new wars and crises?
Oh, tell us about the Nazis.
To make profit out of them. Our compatriots, our brothers and sisters in Ukraine, part of our people, saw with their own eyes what the leading circles in the West are preparing for the people in the world. And they have expressed their true nature in there. And we will not back in 1991, the West believed that USSR will not come back, or Russia will not come back from that blow, and we had this awful 1990s. And however, Russia,
yeah, you know what was awful in the 1990s? It was called the Budapest Memorandum. That's when the US, the UK, and Russia guaranteed the sovereign borders of Ukraine if Ukraine gave up their nukes. Russia was one of the signers that would guarantee the border of Ukraine. Unbelievable.
Did that and became more powerful and took its deserved place. And but the West is looking for new opportunities to hit us. And they always dreamt about breaking our state into smaller states who will be fighting against each other.
In 1991, the West was like, all right, Russia's going to become democratic. That's great. And it looked like it was going to happen for a while. And then it went off into this crony capitalist oligarchic kind of something. And then it became even more anti-West over time. And so, but no, that was not the dream.
They cannot be happy with this idea that there's this large country with all the riches, natural riches, and people who will never live under foreign oppression.
Yeah, Putin, we're jealous of you. Is that what you're saying?
And they are prepared to to do everything using this neo-colonial system to rob all other countries in the world.
This is the most bizarre. Just have to wonder what people are thinking when they're hearing this. He's calling the West neo-colonial, America and Europe are neo-colonial. What is he doing by colonizing essentially these areas of Ukraine and absorbing them into Russia? He calls the West imperial. He's acting imperially. It's like he doesn't even see the irony.
And the whole humanity has to pay them some dues to this hegemon.
To the hegemon.
And
You're not.
This cruel motivation, and that's why they are very aggressive towards independent states. They're aggressive towards traditional values and culture.
Who's aggressive toward independent states again? The West is aggressive toward independent states, and you're not?
They are trying to undermine international and integrational processes and new centers of technology.
The West is trying to undermine international processes, but a sham referendum doesn't do that.
Development. It is critically important to them so that all countries surrender their sovereignty to the United States voluntarily. Some countries.
Is he smoking crack? That all countries surrender their whatever to the United States? What's he talking about? The United States doesn't want that. We're not interested in that. We're not at all. Like, we weren't even paying attention to you until you started saber rattling against Ukraine, and then we started paying attention.
Is voluntary.
What?
Some of this thing was actually from his missus.
Okay, so we'll deal with it later. I'm recording something.
Agreed to do this, and they voluntarily agreed to become vassals of these states. Others are being destroyed and bullied, and after there are millions of broken lives.
Okay, others are being destroyed and bullied. Are you kidding me? Like, you're not destroying and bullying? Are you the white knight on the horse, like coming to save the day? But this is what Russians are hearing. Honestly, this is why this is so maddening. They don't have access to Western media, and so they don't get my commentary, 2 cents reply, or whoever's ability to speak back to this.
And areas of social disturbance and so on. The only thing they want to have is their profit out of this, their greed, their desire to keep their unrestricted power.
So it's the West that's greedy in taking what? We've just given $16 billion to Ukraine. You just annexed it's a part of the Ukraine that's the size of Bulgaria. Who's the greedy one?
This is the reason of this hybrid war that the West is conducting against Russia.
First thing I agreed with so far in his entire speech, it is a hybrid war, but it's not just the West conducting it against Russia. Russia is also conducting it against the West. It is a hybrid war. There is a military, there's an economic, there's a political, there's informational, and we're here right now because of the informational war.
A colony. They do not want to have cooperation on the basis of equality. They want to rob us.
They want to rob us. You're robbing Ukraine of the size of territory the size of Bulgaria.
To them, our philosophy is a direct threat, and that's why they attempt to kill our philosophers. And
what? Your philosophy is what? I think actually what's going on is that you can't have a democracy right up on your border. It's not so much NATO, it's that if they become more Western, if they become more democratic, that throws your authoritarian regime into great danger.
Development and our livelihood is a threat to them. They do not need Russia. We need Russia.
Wow.
Boss incoming.
It's a deal. Have your mommy call my mommy. Bye.
Ready for that marketing presentation?
I'd like to remind you that the ambition for world domination has been broken by Russian resistance many times in the past. And today we are defending our values. And
Ha! He said, today we're defending our values. That was a translator saying that. But yeah, today you are defeating your values.
They believe that they will not be punished for their actions.
Wow, it's always bizarre for me to hear Putin's speech, or for what Maria Zakharova will say, or Lavrov, or whatever. Today, they believe they will not be punished for their actions. You believe you will not be punished for your actions. That's what's really amazing here. Oh.
And the agreements in the area of strategic cooperation are being cancelled. Agreements on the state level announced to be null and void. And the agreements that were there in the past are being completely cancelled. And the
agreements that were there in the past, like what? Like the Minsk agreement? Okay, I got you with the Minsk agreement. How about Budapest, where you were supposed to be guarantor of the Ukrainian border, and you just wholesale took 4 oblasts?
Agreements on the non-proliferation of weapons unilaterally cancelled.
You unilaterally canceled it. I can't believe he even raised that. He just talked about the Budapest memorandum, and he what? No, you weren't talking about Budapest. You were talking about something else. Budapest did exactly that, and then you just arbitrarily invaded.
Who? What are these rules that they're acting based on? Who saw those rules? Who agreed upon those rules?
You agreed to those. Well, your country agreed to those rules, and you broke them.
We see that there are double standards, triple standards.
I agree with that. There are double standards and triple standards, and you're violating them.
Just taking us for fools. Russia is a great country, and it's a great civilization.
It might be a great civilization. It's now a second-tier power after the breakup of the Soviet Union. You were this big, and now you're that big. And now you're that big, a little bit bigger, because you just stole some territory from Ukraine.
It's not going to continue to live under this false rules.
This is just painful. Thank you for sticking with me if you're still here.
It's the West that broke that principle of the borders, and they are now unilaterally deciding who has the right to self-determination and who doesn't.
It's almost like, how can you even say that? You're unilaterally saying who has the right of self-determination by breaking through into Ukrainian borders, taking their land and calling it like, hey, this was a legit referendum. You're doing exactly what you're accusing the West of doing. But what did they do?
Why are they making that decision? Who gave them the right to decide that? That's why they're very angry at the choice of people in Crimea, Donetsk, Kherson, and
they're not angry at the choice of the people. They're angry at you because you are a tyrant who came in and held false referendums that is not really the will of the people.
That's why they believe that people do not have the right to self-determination.
They do believe that the people have the right to self-determination. So if you had free elections, we would honor it, but that's not the same thing.
Their hegemony has got a character of totalitarian nature.
Again, it's amazing that he's talking about the totalitarian nature when you can get 15 years in prison for saying anything against the military. if this is Kirill, I don't know that it is, but Patriarch Kirill just said that if you die fighting for Russia, all your sins will be forgiven. Nowhere in the Bible, but he can say it.
Militarism, and they believe that all these countries have to be joined to the list of barbarians who need to be fought against and oppressed.
Well, you are committing war crimes, so there's that.
There's nothing new in this. The Western elites have always been like this. They have been colonizers, and they remain colonizers.
He's saying that the West are colonizers while he's colonizing. I mean, the irony.
They discriminate, and they...
Do you like to get high quality coaching leads without spending $1 on ads? The reality is these days your customer...
They distinguish between the first class nations and second class nations. We never believed that, and that's why there is this Russophobia that is being spread all over these countries.
He likes talking about Russophobia, and it wasn't there until you invaded. It was more like, well, Russia's doing its thing. Once you started invading Ukraine, it came, this Russophobia was really a reaction to what you were doing to your neighbor that's a third your size. You're a bully. That's what's going on.
Western countries believe that their civilization and their neoliberal culture is the golden standard to everyone else.
Yeah, actually, I can buy that. I believe that our culture is actually our democracy, our rights are a better standard than the oppression that you have in your country. Yes, I do believe that. I will subscribe to that.
Sounds quite strange. Even the Western elites even believe that their own sins have to be accepted by everyone else. We need to remind the West that neo-colonial politics began in the Middle Ages, and then they robbed India, Africa, and they were...
Yeah, he likes this. Lavrov did the same thing, going to Africa, talking about how they were never colonizers in Africa. Okay, that's fair. The fair point. Russia was never colonizing in Africa because they were going to right on the outskirts of their own borders and grabbing land from their neighbors. So they were colonizing that way.
Wars against China, where they had to surrender their ports for opium trade. What they did subjected the whole nations to drug abuse and to other things, and they were effectively hunting people. And we are proud of the fact that in the 20th century it was our country which was the head of the anti-colonial movement and allowed these...
That's not true. It was actually the United States. The British, to their credit, went along with it begrudgingly, but it was actually the United States that was pushing the anti-colonial kind of agenda, and it wasn't you. Sorry.
Independent development and conquer
You know, I just thought about this. In the 20th century, you were colonizing, it's called the Warsaw Pact. You were colonizing Poland and Lithuania and Bulgaria and Romania and all these other countries. That was not your country. That was you colonizing. You're such a freaking hypocrite.
And hunger. And one of the reasons for Russophobia and this anger from the Western elites is to do with the fact that we did not allow them to rob these formerly colonial countries further. And this was achieved.
You just got to wonder what these guys are thinking here, listening to this, going, is he really serious about this? Is that what?
That we were able to create a strong independent state, which continued to strengthen on the basis of strong values of Christianity, Islam, and other religions. It's
I'm going to skip that one.
known that there were plans of intervention in Russia at the beginning of 17th century, and
Okay, here we go. Novorossiya.
and these plans failed, and all of this was achieved at the end of 20th century.
Yeah, well, so 17th century. So when you're talking about Catherine the Great and Novorossiya and conquering land that was Ukrainian, you weren't colonizing, but the West, they're bad because they were colonizing.
The state collapsed, and they pumped out trillions of dollars from this country using various schemes. We did not forget anything. In these days, in Donetsk and Lugansk, in Kherson and Zaporozhye, people spoke about their desire to restore our historic unity. Thank you.
Restore your historic unity. Yeah, this is why Poland and the Baltic states are so ardently supporting Ukraine, because they do not ever want to restore the historic unity that he's speaking of, because they never want to be subjugated again.
Western countries.
Negative keywords are now very dangerous. Very dangerous. Google will allow you to add negative keywords.
For centuries have been talking about their desire to bring democracy to other countries, and this is completely opposite. It's pressure and oppression.
Western countries want to bring democracy, and this is the complete opposite, he says. Are you smoking crack? All the West wants to do is allow Ukraine to go its own way without your invasion, without your intervention, without you trying to slice off a big chunk of their country. Then they'll go away. They're not trying to go and invade your country.
And slavery and violence. And this world order is undemocratic and is void of liberty.
This world order is undemocratic, but what you're doing with a sham election is democratic.
West is a country that used nuclear weapons twice.
Okay, first, the West is not a country. You're talking about the United States. They used nuclear weapons twice to end the war that would have cost many, many times if you had gone a conventional route. It ended it. It was merciful to be done with it rather than have an invasion that would cost hundreds of thousands of both Japanese and Americans.
It's like in Hiroshima, where the towns that were attacked by, and they ruined all these cities in Hamburg and Cologne in Germany without any military need, just to demonstrate without any military need.
Yeah, I'm thinking that those who were in England surviving the Blitz would have thought that there was a military need.
Necessity. They carpet bombed these cities in order to threaten the whole world and our country. And they carpet bombed Vietnam and used chemical weapons. And up to this day, they are occupying Korea, Japan, and Germany, in fact.
Occupying Korea. The Koreans, there's a force there to prevent a nuclear crazy dictator in Korea. A force is there on the border because of that. They're not occupying South Korea. Are you nuts?
And they are talking about them as their partners.
They are. They're partners.
Their allies. And we can see that the first people, the first leaders of these countries are being listened to. They bug their offices and also their homes.
Again, it's the irony of the Russians talking about they bug. Oh.
And we can see that these countries just accept that. And they're developing chemical weapons and experiment on people, and they believe this to be
What?
noble causes, and they provoked today's large movement, immigration movement, through their actions. Now they are transporting wheat out of Ukraine. Where is it going? Under the pretext of ensuring food security for the poorest countries. Where is it actually going? It's going to Europe. Maybe
Is going to other places. He said this before. It was a lie. It goes to Europe. It goes through Europe in part, and goes to Europe in part, goes to Africa. It goes to Asia.
5%, less than 5% goes to the poorest countries.
That is not true.
Again,
that is demonstrably not true.
This is just fooling and deceit.
That's right. This is deceit.
American
This
elites,
speech is deceit.
in essence, are using the tragedy of these people in order to weaken their competitors, in order to conquer the national states. And this goes for other countries, France, Spain, Italy, and so on. And Washington is asking for more and more sanctions, and majority of European leaders simply agree to this. They understand that America is pushing for complete cut-off of Russian energy to EU in order to capture the European market themselves. The European elites,
I mean, this is just laughable.
understand all of that themselves, but they prefer to just submit to these demands, and this is just a bit.
They're not doing it for that reason. They're doing it because they're trying to support Ukraine by not giving you extra money in order to fund your war.
Of their people, of their own people. But Anglo-Saxons are not happy with the sanctions. They moved to terrorist attacks, having arranged the explosions on the pipelines.
Yeah, we don't know who did it. For all we know, you did it. We don't know who did that yet.
Lines in the sea, and they are destroying the European infrastructure. It's all clear who benefits from this. The diktat of the United States is based on sheer power.
Are you freaking kidding me? The United States is based on sheer power. Like, what you're doing to Ukraine is not based on sheer power.
But it's wrapped into this pretense of international law and principles. And that's why.
Whereas you're not making a pretense by having a sham referendum and then going through the legal things and then saying, we're defending Russia.
There are hundreds and hundreds of military bases and attempts to further expand NATO and create new military alliances. And they're actively working on in strengthening the connection between Washington and Tokyo, and they and anyone who is daring to challenge the hegemon is automatically declared a pariah.
It's interesting that they weren't really working on strengthening that until you invaded Ukraine. So what do you think is the cause of this?
In the new colonial plans presented by the West in the form of trying to contain other countries. But what that actually means is undermining any sovereign centers. We talked about containment.
Undermining any sovereign centers. I mean, it's almost like he doesn't realize just how ironic this is.
No, about containment of Iran, China, and other countries. We know that the current partners and current allies of the U.S. We know that whenever the U.S. doesn't like something, they introduce sanctions against their allies or partners.
Well, when you violate international law, yeah, they do.
In practice, and this will continue. in the crosshairs. They've got everyone, including our closest neighbors, CIS countries.
Your closest neighbor, like Ukraine, that you just invaded?
They they started the sanction blitzkrieg against Russia, and they thought that they would order the
As
whole
opposed to the blitzkrieg against Ukraine.
world around using that. However, not everyone is excited about that. We see that
That's true. Syria, who else is in your corner? Iran, they're in your corner. That is true. There are a handful of countries that are right behind you. North Korea's there with you.
masochists and other people who like these non-traditional political relations, they refuse to cooperate with Russia, and we see that the West has the habit of brute force and trying to
The West has a habit of brute force. It's true. The U.S. does use force occasionally when situations demand, but you're talking about the habit of brute force. You just knocked over Ukraine. You did it again in 2014. You did it in Georgia in 2008. And you're going to do it again unless you're stopped now, which is the point.
capture everything. But then they are frozen in the past. And this creates this concept of exceptionalism. But it also creates the culture of information starvation in the West.
Oh my gosh. I mean, the irony, information starvation, when you outlawed Google, you can get 15 years for speaking out against the military. People went to jail for holding up blank signs in Russia.
Found the truth using very aggressive propaganda, like Hebels.
Oh my gosh.
They say that the larger the deceit, the more people will believe.
The larger the deceit, the more people will believe it. Did he just say that?
They are printing money, but you can't feed anyone with this money. You cannot warm your homes with this money. What's very important is what we just said. You cannot feed people with this printed money. You need to have food. And this inflated capitalizations will not be able to feed anyone either. You need to have actual food.
I think he's talking about inflation, and inflation is kind of a worldwide thing. It's happening in Russia at about the same rate as it is in other places around the world.
So politicians in Western Europe have to persuade their citizens to shower less, to eat less, and put on warm clothes.
Again, inflation's hitting Russia at about the same rate.
And those who disagree with this are announced as radicals, and they always point to Russia saying this is the source of your troubles. And I would like to emphasize that there is the basis to believe that Western elites are not going to look for any ways out of current financial and food crisis, which happened due to their own fault. Their fault that they conducted
this was artificially created by Russia through the invasion. It's not their fault.
That they have been conducted
unless you're saying it's their fault that they stood up to Russia, who invaded Ukraine.
The last few years. And they're not going to resolve problems of injustice, and they are going to steer towards their usual recipes. We see that the crisis of the beginning of the 20th century was resolved through the First World War. And we see that the US, after going into recession, was able to impose the dollar on the rest of the world.
Yeah, he really wants to get away from the dollar and make like the ruble the standard of trade in the world. That's not going to happen.
See that the crisis has become more acute in the 70s or 80s of the last century. And we see that they have used and abused the resources of the disintegrated Soviet Union. And now they have their goal to break Russia at any cost. And they want to rob people of their riches, to plug.
Okay, they want to rob people of their riches. What are you doing to Ukraine? And they want to break Russia at any cost? No, we want to break you so that you don't do this again to another neighbor and destabilize the entire world in the process.
Their own holes. And they will, if they succeed, they will try to lead the whole system into complete collapse.
Again, the irony, if you succeed, you will send the entire system, the entire international order into collapse.
And they will try to write it off with a war. Russia understands its responsibility to international community.
Russia understands its responsibility to the international community by doing what? By invading your neighbor and toppling international law?
And it's obvious that today's neo-colonial model is doomed. But I would like to emphasize that the real masters will continue to fight to the end. They've got nothing else to offer apart from keeping that racketeering and robbing model that they've stuck to.
You're calling the United States racketeering and robbing with what you're doing on the ground in Ukraine right now as we speak.
And
amazing.
Today, they are moving to radical attack on basic values of family and so on. I would like to address all citizens of the country, not just those who are in this audience. I'd like to address everyone in Russia.
Yeah, and now he's doing that because all of this has been a propaganda speech to kind of say West is bad. I'm doing this because I'm standing up to the West. And you'll see, if you go back to my last video, you'll see that his approval rating goes up commensurate when he was invading Ukraine, or in 2014, when he was invading Ukraine this year. And when his approval rating goes up for invading Ukraine, also anti-Western, anti-US sentiment goes up in conjunction. So that's why he's speaking to this whole audience. He knows what he's doing. This is political theater.
Do we want here in Russia, in this country, do we want father and mother to be replaced by parent number one, parent number two? Are they crazy? Do we want in our schools, right from the early age, so the children are being advertised all these sexual deviations and so on, and where they're offered to change their gender and so on? Do we want any of that for our country?
Yeah, and so he's on to a theme where he's trying to make that like that's the whole West. That's not the whole West. Much of the West is split about that, and many do not want that. Some do, but he's making it like that's what part and parcel of what the West is about, and it's not.
None of that is acceptable to us. We have our own future. The dictature of Western elites is aimed at subjugation of people of their own countries too. Everyone. Complete denial of people's rights, and they are moving towards the open satanism.
Complete denial of people's rights. I wonder what they would think about this speech in Ukraine.
And Jesus said that
oh my gosh,
you will see people.
Please don't quote Jesus.
You'll see the people by their actions.
Well,
And
if you're going to quote them, at least quote something that's condemning you. Yes, you'll know them by their fruits, and we're knowing you by your fruit.
we see that new centers of development are being formed now, and they represent the majority.
Is that what you're going for with this? How about that you're bombing civilians, that you're killing civilians when they're trying to escape on a train. You're killing civilians at a shopping mall and then lying about it and saying, "Oh, we were targeting this military structure." Really?
Of humanity, and they are prepared not just to present an alternative, but also to defend their own sovereignty and gain true liberty and historic perspective.
Yeah, well, the Ukrainians are defending their sovereignty to gain true liberty, so they're doing that.
The right to their own development and to their own harmonious life. We've got a lot of people who support us, including in the US, and we feel their support in various.
You don't have a lot of people who support you in the US. You have a lot of trolls on social media, but as far as position of support in the US, it is both Republicans and Democrats by a wide majority are supporting Ukraine.
Societies and countries. We have the movement that is being developed now, that is developing anti-colonial freedom movement.
Anti-colonial.
And this is the power that will determine the future political reality. Dear friends, today we are fighting for just and freedom path.
You're not fighting for justice or freedom. You're really not. You're fighting to acquire a part of Ukraine that's about the size of Bulgaria because you think you can get away with it.
Ourselves, for Russia, for dictature and imposing of the will is left in the past.
Oh.
That nothing should be based on somebody's exceptionalism, on suppression of other cultures and countries.
Wow. Nothing should be based on suppression of another culture in other countries, which is exactly what your teachers are doing in the occupied territories of Ukraine.
We have to turn over this page. The destruction of this Western hegemony is irreversible. The world will never be the same.
Yeah, there might be that. The world will never be the same.
By this history, by our faith, to fight for historic Russia.
Historic Russia. So what he means by that is Novorossiya, Catherine the Great's grabbing of what it was Ukraine a couple hundred years ago.
For great historic Russia, for future generations, for our children and grandchildren. We need to protect them from these horrible experiments which are aimed to break their soul and their consciousness.
What?
We are fighting for our culture, for our language, so that it's impossible to just cancel it and remove it from history.
Okay, here he's talking about laws that the Ukrainians had passed that were anti-Russian language, which might have been an overreach, but there's a reason that it was an overreach given what the Russians have historically done, or Russians and Soviets have historically done to Ukraine.
To consolidate the whole society. And the basis for this unification can only lie in integrity, in freedom, and our compassion.
Integrity, freedom, and compassion are the basis for the unification, not might, mate, and right. Good grief.
Are the basic values that unify this. Ivan Alexandrovich Ilyin is a true patriot. If I believe my motherland to be Russia, that means I think in Russian, I sing in Russian, and I believe in spiritual power of Russian people, and my spirit and its spirit, my spirit, the suffering of the people is my suffering, and the development of this people is my development. So these words highlight the principle which was followed by many generations of Russians, and it's especially relevant today. The choice was made by people from LPR and DPR in Kherson and Zaporozhye.
Again, it was not the choice of the people of the LPR, DPR, Kherson, and Zaporizhia. It was a choice of the occupiers. Let's keep that clear.
They made their choice.
No, they didn't.
To be with their people, to be with motherland, to follow its faith path, and to win. And the truth is with us.
The truth is not with you.
The Russia is behind us.
In fact, you've just pantsed yourself by saying so many funhouse mirror things that were just like ironic that you're doing the very things you're condemning others of. Oh, if you're still with me, you're awesome, because this was painful. Okay, it's not over. He's going to call people up. So stay tuned.
This ceremony of signing of documents is about to begin.
These are the leading traders of Ukraine. It's Dennis Pushlin in the front of the DPR, and the other heads of the other so-called republics, which are really oblasts of Ukraine.
The president of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin, head of the Donetsk People's Republic, Denis Vladimirovich Pushilin, head of Lugansk People's Republic, Leonid Ivanovich Pasechnik.
Okay, so it's taking these that he's just signed the formal
The head
decree.
of Zaporozhye Oblast, Evgeny
Now
Vitalyevich
notice a Z on his
Valetsky.
lapel.
The head of Kherson Oblast, Vladimir Vasilievich Salda. Are signing the agreements between the Russian Federation and Donetsk.
It doesn't matter how
Republic.
formally the structure is, if it's under duress and if it is a sham and if it's
Russian
faked.
Federation
I mean, that's
and
what's going on. And so
Lugansk
they're having this gloss
Republic.
of legitimacy, and it's going to go through the Duma and the courts and whatever else. That's the next steps, but it's not going to be legitimate.
Russian Federation and Zaporozhye region.
This will
Russian Federation and Kherson region.
this will ultimately be settled on the battlefield. So this is actually meaningless. It'll allow them to have a
On
propaganda advantage by being able to say that they're defending Mother Russia, but ultimately it'll be meaningless.
stepping into the Russian Federation of Donetsk People's Republic.
That Z stands for swastika.
Lugansk People's Republic.
I saw that the other day, swastika as a term, and I thought, hey, why are we actually using it? Because that's actually more fitting than that there are Nazis running around in Ukraine.
Zaporozhye region. And Kherson region. And forming as part of the Russian Federation of new subjects.
That's right. They're subjects. Now you're subject to Russia, which is a whole lot worse than where you were before. Okay, so if you have stuck with me so far, this is the very end. Thank you so much. Put in the comments, I watched all the way to the end because I want to say you are awesome. Thank you for caring about what's going on in Ukraine. I really appreciate it. You're the hardcore and you understand now more than almost everybody else what Putin said and why he's saying it and how it's been said. So you have the answers to fight back against the trolls. Thank you for your time.